It's all yours, Gretchen. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. Well, hi, everybody. I can't believe we're already at this point in the year. It feels like I was just sitting here listening to last year's cohort read and looking at some of the faces of the people who are in my new cohort this year, who attended last year. Just like last year, it's really moving to me to think that there were all these books that didn't exist a year ago today, and now here we are hearing from them. I wanted to say before we get started what a privilege it's been to work with this group of poets over the last 12 months. I only hope they learned as much from me as I did from them. I think they would all agree we've worked exceptionally hard, reading dozens of collections and writing hundreds of pages of new work and workshopping, revising, shaping everything into meaningfully ordered manuscripts. I'm very happy to report that each poet in this year's cohort accomplished their goal and finished a full-length collection, which they are currently preparing to send out to various contests and open reading periods. So I just want to reiterate, like, some of these books didn't exist at all a year ago today. So that is just a really massive accomplishment. I'm so proud of you guys. I do want to give the poets every moment of time to showcase their work tonight, but I just wanted to say one last time to all of you, to the group, how much I've loved working with you and how much I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and to seeing what you do as public poets. Thank you so much for a very fulfilling year, everybody. So we have 7 readers tonight. Each will read for around 10 minutes. I will introduce each poet by reading their bios and then speaking a little bit about them or about their collection before we begin. So our first poet is Marika Gillis. Marika Gillis recently transplanted to Providence, Rhode Island after spending most of her 20s braving the winters and basking in the summers of Minnesota and northern New Hampshire. She graduated with a bachelor's in creative writing from Colorado College and then completed an internship at the Loft in 2016. Since, she's incorporated poetry into her life through classes and workshop groups. Marika has worked as a server and bartender for the past 10 years and lives with her boyfriend and their 4-day-old baby. Her collection is comprised of a series of letters addressed to her developing baby throughout the course of her pregnancy. It explores growth, grief, worldly beauty, interiority, and the transition to parenthood. So Marika and I began the year revising and editing a strong batch of poems that she had written before the program started. We were thinking of places she might publish them. And then also she was exploring her obsession with apple trees, not with eating apples, but with apple trees specifically. A few months into the program, though, she came to me with this new idea that she wanted to be writing to this new person in her life. And what she's accomplished is a book that is startlingly intimate and generous and sensual and unflinching. The philosophical moments offered in the book are tender and rich in significance, and her memories are vivid and poignant. The poet's handling of the tension between grief and joy and her amazing talent for capturing both love of place and love of food has made this a book that I have no doubt will be many people's nightstand book as soon as someone is smart enough to publish it. So as I said, Marika is joining us tonight with her 4-day-old daughter, Lucille. Please welcome Marika.
Thank you, Gretchen. You introduced my book better than I think I ever could. Just to kind of set it up, my poems are written small poems addressed as originally as letters to the baby while she was developing. So they're in little prose sections. None of them are titled, and I'm going to read each one and pause between sections just so you know where one starts and the other one ends. I primarily took from 2 sections of the books. The first 2, spring and summer, they're mostly a little bit shorter than the later on pieces. And the first section here is spring and summer, which all take place in northern New Hampshire. Today, you're the size of an apple seed. I can't help remembering the seeds I crushed in the press last fall, how each one contained a distinct set of genes that could grow a tree with an entirely different type of apple. To reproduce a specific varietal, black black Oxford, chestnut crab, sun gold, nutting bumpus. It must be grafted onto another apple tree. That's why feral apple trees, those grown from seed behind abandoned houses or in the woods just past orchards, can offer such a surprise. Some we'd eat as snacks, like those we found that tasted of pears, and others were for cider. Others still were only good for feeding bears and deer. Last week, Dwight showed me how to prune apple trees to promote fruiting for as many apples as each tree could bear. I think you will be sweet, but I will take you however feral you are. You should have seen the sunset tonight, pink blue behind streaky clouds. And your father's face, the highway passing behind him as he told me about the sunsets in Arizona, all the purples, oranges, and reds. How much like a child it made him feel. And how he wishes his father was still alive, holding you, so you could see it all too. Later, close to home, the mountains were just silhouettes against the blue. We could have been anywhere. The lilacs are beginning to blossom. Today, I napped in the sun at the cemetery nestled against the lilac tree. You are beginning to look human somehow, even though I'd never know you were in there, if not for feeling seasick on hard ground, or for the tender swell of my breasts. We are growing vegetables in the community garden. The air at the garden is always richer, the insects more plentiful, the earth lending to a lighter step. The cucumbers are shooting off tendrils that want to wrap around anything that stays still for a breath. They wrap and wrap to lift themselves higher, to stay above the dirt. Soon your hand will wrap around my finger just the same. And it does now, it's very sweet. Driving home from work tonight, all the trees were coated in cold July dew. They shone as if dusted with snow. All that glimmering made me think of sea shine, of moonlight before the moon rises, of what fall nights and then our winter will bring. Last night, I picked basil in Drew's garden. It was almost too dark to see the plant's fist-sized leaves or the stalks that were becoming leathery. He'd waited too long to tend to plants. Even the smallest was starting to flower, petals turning from green to white. Where I could, I pinched off the heads to pause the bittering. Despite its age, I picked a shopping bag full of basil. I planned to cut it with spinach for pesto, with hopes that pine nuts, parmesan, and olive oil will fill it with so much richness, the bitter may come as a relief. So the next few poems here take place during the late summer and fall, and they're all set after our move down to Providence. Even when the air is still and cool, it's humid here. Maybe the proximity to the ocean, all that salt sitting heavy in the air. You can sense so many things now, light such that you can tell when it's day or night, and music and voices, which you're beginning to recognize. But from where you are, warm and wet inside me, you can't feel the damp cold, couldn't breathe in the thick night, even if your lungs are working. But you're still here, just where I am, your first spring and summer gone, first fall coming now. Your heart has already beat through 2 seasons. Sorry, I'm in one place here. Last week, you and I went out for Udon. I've always liked dining alone in the public, the appearance of isolation in the midst of so much social buzz, the secret thrill of splurging on a night to myself, where I can order any side dish and finish every bite. Besides the udon, we got hot tea and chicken tatsudaage. The chicken came out first, dark thigh meat colored rose, tan, and cream. It was fried quick, so the meat had a light crisp to it before giving in to tenderness. It was salty and oil slick below the starched surface, fatty iron flavor buoyed by the Kewpie mayo dolloped on the small plate, creamy and light. A lemon slice's acid offered something bright in the richness, something sour to pull me through all that savory chew. The soup was a clear dashi broth, salty and deep, bronze umami in the clean white bowl. The noodles were thick and chewy as I'd been craving for months, the sliced tofu sweet and fried thin. The mushrooms were delicate and firm, and the chives were fresh. I got extra noodles, though the broth was only warm by the time I dropped them in, and the noodles were chilled, so the last sips of soup were close to cold. But I loved every bit of give and resistance that the noodles had, and I loved to sit there with you, our love so private at the little table. I hope you tasted the salty broth, the delicate vegetables and legumes, the light wheat of the udon. I hope you felt the hot tea, the slight tilt of evening caffeine. I hope we'll eat alone together again at some small restaurant in the city soon. This time of year, in gray weather turning to rain that too soon could turn to snow, I think of Lake Superior. I think of Highway 61, the scenic route that only offers views every now and then along the way, through spruce groves framing clusters of cabins, or the occasional pull-offs, the state park parking lots that are too far from the cliffs to reveal anything past their white pines. Still, being so close to the lake, you know it's there. Baby, just in case you never make it to Lake Superior, I want you to know what it's like, how big it really is. The dark waves against scraggly brown cliffs make it feel like the ocean, like the severe northern coasts of the Atlantic. Hundreds of ships have lost themselves in the black depths, and at least half remain unfound. The lake's vastness makes it the biggest in the world. But there's a sense of closeness in knowing that it ends, contained by land along the length of its shore. I love knowing that though I never see them, there are wolves moving parallel to the shoreline impacts, and individual juveniles whose paths streak through the boreal forest as they shoot off on their own, like meteors through the dark, quiet woods. My nipples now dampen with colostrum, clear and tacky some days, or barely translucent on others. Transparent, translucent, opaque. I remember studying rocks and minerals in Mrs. Davis's third grade classroom, assigning a word to each specimen to indicate how much light made it through. Quartz, sulfur, amethyst, obsidian. Mrs. Davis's breath always smelled bad, but she was kind to all her students. None of the rocks were ever transparent. Depending on the time of day, how much light gets through to you. Is my body translucent from where you're curled? I can't explain how bright it will all be for you soon, the world lightening for your newly open eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. That was beautiful. I know it's hard when we are all on Zoom and everyone's muted that you can't hear everyone clapping, because I'm sure if we were in the performance hall, you would definitely feel it. That was a beautiful selection. You did a great job picking those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and congratulations again. Yeah. Cool. Well, our next poet is Rachel Werner. Rachel Werner is a teaching artist for Hugo House, the Loft Literary Center, and Lighthouse Writers Workshop, in addition to being the founder of the Little Book Project Wisconsin. Her literary writing and craft essays have been featured by Off Menu Press, Digging Through the Fat, and Voyage YA Literary Journal. A selection of Rachel's recipes are included in Wisconsin Cocktails, UW Press 2020, and her poetry in the anthology Hope is the Thing, Hope is the Thing, Wisconsinites on Perseverance in a Pandemic. Her debut science book for kids, Floods, is one of the titles in Capstone's new Wild Earth series. She also regularly contributes content to The Kitchen, The Spruce Eats, and Fabulous Wisconsin. Rachel is intrigued by exploring how dominant societal agendas like gentrification and perceptions such as colorism take root and often become a manifesto of a particular arc in time, generation, or demographic. Much of her poetry reflects a personal reckoning with the intersectionality of these issues, with preconceived cultural norms and a deep desire to challenge and expose these harmful biases by deepening our grasp of the contemporary American narrative. Whose voices are being heard, which are still being ignored, even at times by the organizations and initiatives supposedly serving as their champions. Rachel's poems are a swirl of weight and levity. She cleverly turns fairy tale tropes on their heads and challenges us with poems that take the alphabet and wring every bit of power from it. Rachel's fidelity to her own voice and process is something I greatly admire. And just as she's found an audience in so many other platforms, I'm confident that she'll find one for these poems. Please welcome Rachel.
Thank you for the introduction, Gretchen. I'm honored that I get to follow Marika, who also read a beautiful selection of work too, in which I see everybody kind of complimenting on the chat. And thank you, Jenny, for turning on closed captioning in case anybody needs it. I'm glad that we have it now. So I will go ahead and get started. My collection, the title of it is called Alphabetum. I'm going to read the selection. Well, I'm kind of going to start toward the end of the collection. And so I'll, like Marika did, kind of pause and then introduce each one too. The first piece I'm starting with is called Scribe. It's actually one that I workshopped with our apprenticeship group earlier last spring. At times the words flow, but the days when they don't, the absence of keystrokes stops my heart, exacerbating the waiting, wanting, and waning, perpetual cousins, repetitive lures, dragging me toward jagged cliffs of dissatisfaction from not manifesting artistic skill upon demand. Dreams rise and plummet, mimicking the peaks and lurches of the mental silent roller coaster I live within, a singular voice screeching, I cannot leave until I am dead. But erasure lacks the vitality only novelty can provide. Thus, again, I begin. I write, I weep, I wilt, exposed to the unforgiving stares of friends, foes, and those above in a heaven to which I shall not go, though I'm ignored by the fiends in the hells below, for whom judgment is the only sin. Words simply said, not hoard or cajoled for dollars, about lived truths I've denied, then severed. Like Gretchen mentioned in her intro, I do, in some of my poems, play with the alphabet. So the next work, Politics, is a nice example of an alphabet-inspired poem. Buried barnacles become burdens, broken, brittle bits, barring blaring bursts before babble begins, by beatifying buffoons, brandishing brackish barbs, blustering bumbling boys, blocking better men. The next piece is called Hierarchy. Death follows success, the temporal made semi-permanent, by cement poured, then stacked for monuments, honoring achievements hardly anyone can recollect, or decipher through the warped narratives we're bound to and continually swallow, blatantly untrue, inwardly choking on disdain for societal case concealed. As popular taste to perpetuate, whilst fabricating biased barricades, no one can escape without being strangled by the invisible strings controlling our fates. The next poem is The Trick. I actually wrote this for Gretchen. It's kind of an inside joke, but the short of it was, it's another alphabet poem, but I'm not big on writing poems that are inspired by nature. And so Gretchen kind of as one of the fun writing prompts or assignments she gave me during our apprenticeship was to see, she mentioned writing a poem about an animal. And I was like, well, if I write an animal about like a poem with an animal, I'm probably gonna have to kill it. So this poem's actually called The Trick. And like I said, and it's actually in the book, and the manuscript is dedicated to Gretchen. So reality rarely recalls radical rebellion. After antagonists, arbitrary allies are bequeathed benign baboons before being brutally beaten by bigots, imposing irrational incarceration trained to trigger toxic temperaments. And so if you saw the poem, the way the lines are stacked, the first letter of each line, so going on a linear line, it actually spells out rabbit. So it's like the trick rabbit. So, and that's the part that obviously without being able to see it, that's missing. The next poem is called Masquerade. Dropping words onto a page every day is cathartic to the pain of paying bills, yet crushing to a creative soul, whoring privy parts for consumption, audiences fetishizing alien margins within the stories she's told, devouring strangers' words stole, siphoned under patriarchal control, but never whole, merely wounds of violation, soaked in dried blood, adorned with pretty bows. The next poem is called Not Your Mama's Orphan. A pocket of solace. Who's that? Where's that? Someone threw me a rope, a rhyme, a release, said the ancestors mocked, then erased by the blood others spilt. While Papa stumbled, when Papa stumbled, Mama grew strong, in spirit, though her body broke. Bequeathing us property quickly sold and misused, persecution, survival's tariff, purging knowledge for acceptance. Is it selling out if you're leveling up? Because I sure did. Silencing kin through ascension, denying a past like quicksand, smothering generations in the end. The next piece is actually a hybrid piece. So it's a combination of prose and poetry. It's called The Trial. In and out and in and out of pain, of love, of faith. Before drawing another breath, there are days I need to mar my flesh or forgo food, but there's no one I can talk to. Brown-skinned girls don't do such things, I was told by kin, but never friends who saw the lighter shades of me, or at least that is what we pretend. Starving to be thin was a race I wanted to win, a hazardous physical goal, yet fueled me mentally, a ghostly hologram of an overachiever everyone loves or despises depending on their mood, or what they want from me. Is it my hair I would fret, which is coarser than preferred by everyone, myself included? Colorism. A word I never heard before the age of 30, but had lived with as a psychological cancer for years. The kryptonite to the black joy I could have inherited had society deemed me, fill in the blank, extraordinary, pretty, worthy, a candle never lit, in darkness left to sit. That was before killing a man. Now here I stand, the courtroom my stage, a tragic figure before you. Those among you have made. Although I'm really to blame when the world drove me insane, restrained by the invisible chains of being a second-rate citizen, despite every charade I played to counter habitual contempt. Yes, I refused to serve, no longer willing to sacrifice the space between my legs for pleasure I was forbidden to own, merely stolen from its rightful owner, me, once a woman, forever a slave. How many hours of rape does it take to fill a decade? An answer no one has bothered to calculate because the victims are female, rarely explicitly named. We are all the same. Whore, bitch, tease, cunt, desired then discarded on a whim, bearing the weight of every sin, even his. I needed it to end. Living in a carnal body, branded with bruises to reflect a daily penance for being born, but not fully broken yet. Only in a dream could I ever believe my pleas would be heard instead of waiting to be judged if I would finally assimilate or burn for never learning my place. An object to violate but not take up too much space. How could I have forgotten the rules of subjugation? I perpetually contemplate, submerged in a room of white faces. And then the final poem I'll read tonight is called Queen Bees. And it's actually the epilogue to my manuscript. And so it ends on a lighter note. So Queen Bees. Black and brown glow outside the rainbow, shining their light. These deep roots are my truth, protection from lies. I know my skin is beautiful and your praise false, fallen on deaf ears. My bountiful crown twists, coils, kinks, yet you are blinded, choosing not to see the glory surrounding me. I am royalty, born of a queen bee, magnificent, radiant, shimmering, she and I, our words drip like honey, our smiles cause a stir. Our hive, my world is full of blossoms, beauty, buzz. Through her fingers, life blooms, the same magic I carry in me and release wherever I rove. We fly, spreading color, breathing hope, pouring bliss onto friends and foes. So keep your pity, I'll cling to joy. Bred to rise from ashes, I soar toward the skies. Thank you all so much for listening this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. That was very powerful. I'm glad you ended on that poem. That's one of my favorites in your book. So it's very nice to see you too, by the way. Hello. So our next poet tonight is Kathleen Wadel. Kathleen Wadel is a lifelong Minnesotan born in Madison, where well-behaved words rain onto parched notebooks. During and since her 50 years as a nurse specializing in behavioral health, her notebook has helped bridge a gap in understanding of herself and her world. Her poetry has been recognized in contests and journals. When not reading, writing, and enjoying nature, you may find her studying the pairings of good food and music, especially in the company of family and friends. So I first met Kathy in a 12-week Loft class, and she had to miss 1 week. And so I met up with her just to catch up a little bit and peek at her poem from the previous week. And the poem that she had written, which I'm happy to say has made it into her collection, was so original and surprising, shadowy and wickedly funny, that I knew she had a special talent, and I was lucky to be working with her. I was thrilled then to see her name on the roster for the year-long program where she completed a book that is full of those qualities and then some. It's not every poet who is willing to read the entire anthology of Dean Young's work with me, for example, but that's the kind of receptive, curious, and ultimately unique poet that Kathy is. Her imagination, both abstract and concrete, is her greatest strength and gift to us as readers. Enjoy being the first of many listeners to encounter the work of Kathleen Wadel.
Am I on?
I can hear you, but you're just very quiet.
Okay, I don't see my, all right. This poem, thank you, Rachel, by the way. I mean, Gretchen.
Gretchen and Rachel.
Yes, both of you. This poem came out of my curiosity about the power of the moon. A full moon and its mischief. Cheetahs need the moon to illuminate their hunt. Lions too, and night blooming cacti need its light to romance bats. And tides time mating rites of grunions lunging to shore. Dung beetles orient to polarized moonlight, and zooplankton's biological clock sets to the light of the moon. Tonight, when you find your way in the dark, as you circle my waist and hope silvers your eyes, is it Luna with her vast to-do list, aiming her torch our way? My parents reinvented themselves a few times and were an inspiration to me in my life. A history in brief. I'm from bean fields, shocked wheat, seed caps, canned peaches, long johns hanging cardboard stiff on the porch. I'm from five and dime, dad forcing smiles at indoor chores, bringing up lady things, paper dolls, candy leeches. I'm from nuts and bolts, stacked paint cans, pitchforks, guns, lawnmowers, China place settings. Their smiles easier now. I'm from convent school, town dances, ripped lips from braces, late night cars purring beneath mounds of snow. I'm from hospital wards, monitors, bedpans, hands reaching to be held. One who made me holy, one who spat in my eye. I'm from rivers of sweet woodruff, chorus of coral bells, hydrangeas deigning to bloom, and these four giddy poppies waving in spring. This is a poem about my mother's last days in her home. Mary's final tour. With her daughters sprawled on her bed, assembled to divide and cast lots, Mary bewilders through the rooms, taking mental snapshots, a tourist who knows this is her last cruise. She pats the porcelain cat, flicks through hangers of frou-frou and suits, mugs to the girls with ropes of glass beads. Out her kitchen window, she notices the first pair of purple martins to set up housekeeping in the Martin house her honey built. Damn it, where were you last year? This is a poem written in response to a prompt, short writing sessions that we as a cohort did with each other. We were to choose a strong emotion and write to that. Portrait in blues. Loneliness idles like cars at the intersection of other people's lives. Loneliness is a barren, arid field of a teenager's Sunday afternoon. A lonely woman who is my mother waves from the window as I back away. Lost love is a rose-colored lonely. In a game of rock, paper, scissors, loneliness crushes, covers up, cuts through soul and sinew. Loneliness is alone time without solace. The linens of lonely lie unwashed, its dirty dishes stacked on the kitchen floor. Loneliness pain is exquisite when faced in a crowded room. Loneliness as poem equals erasure. I saw loneliness lying on a hospital bed, able to move only his eyes. In a game of charades, loneliness sounds like hunger growling. Viewed from loneliness, a rocky precipice looks like relief. Loneliness, like any wound, heals from inside out. On a lighter note, what to see, a traveler's guide. We travel better young, standards less exacting. A veteran wanderer, I whip through hotel rooms with bleach wipes, wishing I had never seen hidden camera videos of maids cleaning glasses with the toilet cloth. I pull back the mattress pad, search for bed bugs, stress over roach eggs, require hot showers and high thread count, scan those never washed decorative pillows for sperm count and pubic hair. Oh, to return to that room above the Granada Cafe, $3 a night, cockroaches marching through open suitcases. We see only the scene beneath our balcony, children all starch and white lace, processing down the alley, hand in hand, to the trill of church bells. Inhale the aroma of fresh espresso, when even that quick glimpse of the Alsatian kitchen would not spoil our kuchen. Counters teeming with bunnies, their brown pellets scattered everywhere. This is a poem about my hometown and someone you know. Bounty. As I like to imagine it, I grew up under the spell of his muse in the same town as the great poet. He ran with my sister's crowd, his father and mine maligned good-for-nothings. Like the day Bly came to town with a dead fox in his trunk, hard up and hoping to collect bounty. He wore sweat rings on his shirt, his hair a nest, and my father standing in his shop window, shaking his head. His own schooling cut short for work, and look what comes of too much dreaming. Every relationship has its trade-offs. This was written for my husband. A fair trade. You give me Honeycrisp, I give you Prickly Pear. You give me spring's first strawberry, I give it back. You give me twigs, I give you nest. You do the heavy lifting, I simmer and stir. You give me brave new world, I give you great expectations. You give me 6 spades, I give you small slam. You give me mown grass, a tank with gas. I place daisies at your plate. You give me the palm of your hand, undulating down my naked spine, slick with almond oil. I give you a sleepy kiss. You give yourself solitude when not kneading or apple dangling. I give you this poem. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Kathy. There's a lot of beautiful love poems in there for her spouse, which I really love those pieces. So I'm really pleased to see what you guys are choosing to read from these collections. You're doing a really great job. Aren't they? Aren't they doing a great job? Silent claps all around, right? Everyone's clapping. Cool. So our next poet to read is Carrie Bassett. Though originally from the East Coast, Carrie Bassett lives and writes in Minneapolis, her spiritual home. She has led many lives, including time in academia and as a certified master gardener, because she likes to play in the dirt. This collection, Windows, is her first. So Carrie, if for those of you who are lucky enough to know her, she's a very thoughtful poet and person. She often came to our sessions with very specific questions about the direction of her work and how it was received. And one of the big questions that we grappled with was this idea of the difference between the I and the I in poems, like the I as in I myself and I, EYE, the I that looks out. Carrie's poems tended strongly toward the EYE, recording the world and especially the natural world and offering that back to us. So one of the things that she and I focused on during the year was how she could incorporate more of her emotional inner life. And what resulted was an intimate and earnest portrait of her life, which she titled Windows, which ultimately became the title of her full collection. In the centerpiece of her collection, Carrie centers the different windows she's looked out of in her life as a child growing up on the East Coast, as a young adult in the Peace Corps, as a young wife, a mother, as a poet, a lover, and an adventurer. Her spirit and friendly nature permeated not only our meetings, but her poems as well, as even the I, EYE poems that flank the centerpiece are companionable and demanding of attention. One of my favorite poems in Carrie's book is a simple one about picking eggs at the grocery store based on their beauty. It's not everyone who moves through the world this way, but you'll find that heart on display here as you listen to Carrie read from her collection, Windows.
Thank you, Gretchen. I
You're
don't
welcome.
think I recognize that person you were talking about. Thank you all for being here. This is exciting. This is great. This is just great to see people and be able to read from what I've been working on for such a long time. And thank you to my far-flung friends for being here. It's so great to see you tonight. And I especially want to thank Gretchen, who's given me a lot this year: advice, critique, and moral support when I was in doubt about my work. And I want to acknowledge the others in my cohort group. Thank you for traveling with me. And I'm carrying my water pistol for my wild cat. Let me shoot her. Come on, get out. Sorry, she walks around and is kind of distracting, and she is wild. I'm going to read you 6 poems tonight on love and death and beauty and everything in between. Well, I guess there's not time tonight for everything in between, but how about later? We'll worry about that later. My first poem comes from hearing two geologists on the radio a few years ago. They used a phrase that really caught me, and I knew I had to write a poem about it. You'll hear the phrase at the end of the poem. It's called Once a Home. Delphiniums grew blue, bluer, bluest, like walking out the back door into the sky. A couple lived there for 5 years, had a child there, hung diapers on the line there. The family moved north and years went by. The house took others in. When the river flooded, the people fled. The house fell. Not knowing this, the mother returned to visit her child's first home. A slab and a maple are all that's left of what was once a home. Moving a rock from damp ground leaves its shape below, an absent presence, an absent presence. And there is a very present presence behind me. I'll see if I can get her down. My next poem is about something that happened to me at a zoo some years ago, and this experience grabbed me so much that I had to write about it. It's called Death of the Matriarch, Washington, D.C. A hot day, I wander the concrete paths of the National Zoo, sucking on lemon drops for refreshment. I'm looking for those so like us and so not. Their hands are hands, their feet like hands. But the gorilla house is closed and a gray van is backed up close to the loading dock. As I wait outside, I chat with Pierre in French because I've overheard him speaking his own language with another zookeeper. He's agitated and uneasy and keeps looking around, especially at the van. Then, because no passersby will understand us, he tells me a secret. That's what he calls it, a secret. Les vétérinaires ont euthanisé la matriarche. The veterinarians have euthanized the matriarch. At that moment, there's activity at the back door of the van. Barely visible to onlookers, a stretcher, lumpy, with something covered in cloth is loaded on. Pierre crosses himself reverently, as if she were a person, openly wipes away tears. And then, like the biblical wailing at my cousin Laura's funeral 2 years ago, the gorillas abandoned in the building begin to roar and thump and bang. Now, years later, on sultry days, when I reach for a lemon drop, I remember Pierre's stricken face and his tears for his grande dame, his great lady, so like us and so not. Her hands were hands, her feet like hands, her feet like hands. Next poem is the one that Gretchen referred to. I like to go to my local co-op and I like to choose eggs from the bulk cooler. And this poem is called, surprisingly, Choosing Eggs. I look at them carefully, each different. I try hard not to duplicate is my goal. One dusky with tiny freckles, one a smooth light tan, another speckled all over with dots or spots at the wide end only. The shell colors are unique, but the shape is egg. I select them in bulk, loose and free at my co-op, all brown in their splendor. I choose each for its own beauty, for its own beauty. Now we come to love, 3 aspects of love, something we've all experienced, I think, but few, maybe few, some of us understand it. You'll see if I do or not. This is called Love in 3 parts. 1, at bedtime, my 2-year-old grandson watches a Czech cartoon about a mole, Kurtek, and his pal Mouse. Beacon falls in love with Mouse. He wants to see Mouse. He misses Mouse when he's out of sight. During the day, he asks when he can see Mouse again. In Paris, a few summers ago, my brother Tom, who was working in the Netherlands, took the train and visited me for the weekend. It was his first visit to the City of Light. We walked for 7 miles. From the Eiffel Tower, we crossed the Seine, sauntered down the Champs-Élysées, strolled past the Louvre to Notre Dame, and ended up at the Place de la Bastille in the midst of a rowdy gay pride celebration resplendent with rainbows. It had become his city. Love begins. I see it. 2, I was with my daughter, her husband, their son Beacon, and their newborn. 10 whole days with my child, being a mother to her own baby daughter. We talked of daily things and laughed the way we always do. Nothing was different. Speech did not slow. Pauses did not lengthen. Touches did not get tenderer. The air did not shimmer and sing. And yet it felt that way. As the waves come onto the shore and seep into the sand, that other world flowed into this one, alive as light. I felt it. 3, he pressed a pillow down on my love and suffocated it, did my former husband. Beacon will outgrow his love for Mouse, but not brother Tom for Paris. Love enters, it lives. Love leaves, I know it. I write these things. I do not understand them. I do not understand them. You've heard in my introduction that I'm originally from the East Coast. Maybe you can tell a little bit from how I talk. But Minneapolis is my spiritual home. I don't know why. It's a mystery, like love. Some years ago, my family had to move away from here, and this poem reflects my longing to return. It's called The Rainbird. The rainbird longs for rain. She can drink only rain though the many blue and white tiled fountains in her city flow day and night with fresh, pure water. Dry-tongued, she stares at the blank-eyed sun. The hyacinth longs to bloom, but the earth grips her bulb in its frozen fist. And I long for my beloved home, north of here and west, with many lakes and sweet, clear air. The rainbird, the hyacinth and I, full of yearning. No way to alter our fates for now. My last poem is a bit lighter. It's called In the Windy Dark. I wrote this poem after sitting on the patio in my backyard one summer night with my sweetie. So here's In the Windy Dark. They sat outside on a late summer evening, talking of life and loss and lovely things in the windy dark. The candles flickered and guttered, and the wax ran onto the table in the windy dark. The leaves rustled and chattered, whispering tales of love and loneliness in the windy dark. A few stars peered out from behind the fleeing clouds, telling the two below of time and space and the length and breadth of things in the windy dark. Those two below had drunk their wine, and the breeze reached out to touch their cheeks in the windy dark. When the stars were gone, she took his hand and led him inside to bed, out of the windy dark, out of the windy dark. I hope you all stay warm and out of the windy dark if you don't want to be there. But if you do, it can be quite magical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. That was a great range, a great selection of different pieces from the book. Something that Carrie didn't mention either is that the prose pieces that make up the kind of lyric essay that the center have these great functions where they have like these little squares cut out of them, out of the text, to represent the window that she's looking out of. And it just actually makes a really interesting visual. So I hope that someday soon you'll be able to pick up a copy of her book and see how it's actually laid out, because it's really interesting. So thank you
I
so
hope
much,
so,
Carrie.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
So our next poet who's going to read is Anna Hartquist Larson. She has been having some tech issues tonight. And so if things get too hairy and I get the word from her via chat, I may step in and read a couple of her poems, because it's very important that you hear some of her amazing work. But we'll see, maybe we'll be lucky. Anna Hartquist Larson is an entrepreneur and writer from Hudson, Wisconsin. She holds bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of St. Thomas. She is an avid runner and a failed gardener who finds inspiration from exploring nature and raising her 3 children with her husband, Dan. In her debut collection, Anna Hartquist Larson turns her attention to the unanswerable questions.
Also, good that
Whoops, someone's muted. Okay. Turns her attention to the unanswerable questions that preoccupy us. What does it mean to be mortal? Why do some of us lead long lives while others are cut short? What legacies do we leave behind? While we get the impression that the speaker in these poems has always grappled with these questions, motherhood in particular has sharpened them and given them urgency and acuity. What does it mean to be a woman in a family, she asks, in public or in a marriage, at work? How do we best love each other and show up for each other, witness each other, and also create space for an inner life that allows our deepest joys and impulses? While Hartquist Larson can't answer these questions, she does amazingly give us, through her fresh imagination, new metaphors and lenses for interrogating them. Please welcome Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really grateful for Gretchen and the cohort. It's been a lifelong goal, dream to complete a manuscript, and so I'm really humbled that it's come to fruition. So, and I admire Carrie and her confident and engaging stage presence. I admire that and aspire to it. I'm going to start off with a poem about my son, my youngest son, called Making Toscano with Isaac. My 7-year-old son begs to help with the soup, so I hand him a potato peeler and he has at it, carving baby reds like he would a block of pine. One slips, sacrificed to the garbage bin. A ring of potato petals collect on the floor around him. He loves me, but he loves this part not. He prefers to add the spices and stir the pot. Perched on a stool in front of the stove, he breathes in deep breaths of fresh basil, his rib cage rising and falling under his sweatshirt. I chop shallots, recalling his birth. The nurses with the crash cart to revive him. The music of his fierce cry, his purple body feasting on air, the labor room staring, starved of breath. Tears on the cutting board full of onions ripe for blame. He wants to measure out the time now, and we both want heat. The second poem I'm going to read is called You Have Never Wasted Your Love. Standing in front of the gas stove, I don't know how to grieve. I clutch the handheld coffee roaster over the flame. It always feels like holding the hand of a friend, palm up, careful to swing my wrist in even motion, shifting the beans to heat them evenly, as if together we are casting birdseed or a sum of hopes into a fountain. They begin to darken like the forecast. These beans, they pop and cluck as their bodies turn caramel. Soft parchment casings shift and lift off like paper wings. A woody cocoa aroma rises, summons memories with my father, the summer I turned 8 when he lost his job and brought home a box of ducklings. The farmer promised they would fly south, and with ritual and belief, I mothered their little bodies full of sawdust and eagerness. Their melody of hunger turned to fear as they entered adulthood, refusing to fly from the backyard pond, even when my father quit leaving out corn. When the November flurries flew and the pond froze over, they huddled, picked off one by the fox. Not one rose up through the snow that swirled like ash. The next poem's called We All Know This Boy. Sitting around the table in the school library, he didn't talk about the blacks and blues of rejection. No one knew about him cleaning the barn at dawn, every tool put in its place, his life tied and hidden. Instead, that day he laughed and whispered about what it felt like to be inside of a girl for a first time. I remember concealing curiosity while rolling my eyes, him nudging my bare knees with his under the table. I remember how casually he spoke about loss. I drove to the church for his funeral. I couldn't get myself to go in. I didn't know what to do, even with my hands. So I sat outside with a weeping hydrangea. I imagined the cold, dark barn in October, across the field, the lights on in his house, his dad seen through the living room window watching TV on the couch. I imagined the aroma of dead leaves suspended in air, silence holding its breath. I wanted there to be a final moment somewhere inside of his darkness where the cry of a door hinge received him. And this next poem is about my daughter, and it's called The Oracle Hosts a Tea Party for Her Sisters. With hands on her hips and hair in a braid, my daughter tells me they should have come by now. Lately, she has been talking about her sisters, and no one can tell her otherwise that she doesn't have any. I want to know their names, but she says I haven't named them. I trust the mystery of her imagination, so this morning I lay out a yellow patchwork tablecloth as she instructs, with the proper number of chairs and plastic teacups. A plate of warm cookies arranged next to the vase of fresh red wood lilies from the garden, altered with baby's breath for an occasion such as this. After brewing tea from her toy kitchen, she carefully pours 4 cups. We sit tightly knit as I drink in their laughter and pretend, hold the hem of what could have been. This next poem is called If You Hold Someone. When my father would travel for work, my mother would ask if I wanted to sleep in her bed on his side, in a house that creaked like the oaks it was built among. I would wrap myself around her, feeling the rise and fall of her, hearing my own heartbeat as I pressed my ear against his pillow, spiced and woody. I read that if you hold someone long enough, the body releases the same hormone as a nursing mother, like the letdown of milk, a balm for an unsettled heart. Like that of my roommate years later, after a bad breakup and news her birth mother didn't want to meet her. She called out to me one night, asked if I would sleep with her in her bed. I wrapped myself around her the way only a woman would, her long hair spread across both our pillows, one knee up like she was running away. I held her hoping that all night was long enough. And this next poem is called Parable of the Cave. It's about a cave that's in Western Wisconsin. Western Wisconsin has a cave beneath acres of farmland and rolling hills. I take my boys there on a hot and sticky afternoon. They're looking for bats. I'm looking for a break from the heat. And the tour guide speaks in a low, cool voice about stalagmites and stalactites. Which ones are which again? How carbonic acid makes them grow an inch every 100 years, slowly growing together like the calcified closing of a jaw. Our minds are full of facts as we are brought to the back, told we won't see our hands in front of us. An awkward man interrupts. He's familiar with every detail of the cave like he's been on the tour a dozen times. He asks about any murders here, just as the lights turn off. And I hate that he is so close to me and I can't see his hands. And in these few long seconds, I try to decide whether to cover my chest or my ass or the whole bodies of my children. But then suddenly my son's blinky shoes save us all. And we quickly stumble to the twilight zone before the opening. Webster calls this a mental state between reality and fantasy, or the space just beyond ethical limits. We emerge squinty-eyed. We have no bats, just our souvenir polished rocks, tokens of mistrust, costly petrified wood. And my last poem is one about my oldest son, and an Italian saying that my grandmother always used, which means write me when you get there. And it's the title too, called Scrivi quando arrivi. Right when you get there, my Italian grandma would say every time my mother would announce she was running away. I imagine a pale blue dress, white ruffled socks, dolls stuffed in a green suitcase. My mother said she never got past the front porch. When I ran away, I might have made it to the end of the driveway. Velcro shoes, denim overalls, forgetting the suitcase altogether, the ditches across the avenue full of wild yarrow, extending that spiced aroma of opportunity. And just like every firstborn in our family, you are running away also. So far, you have progressed past the second cul-de-sac and within earshot of the string of motorcycle riders revving down the county road like excited puppies who can't help themselves but bark. It's just a matter of time. I can feel you dragging my heart by the hair down the gravel road to a future that is impossible to get to on foot. Growing up is taking much longer than you want, but even so, did you know that studies say cells from a fetus are still present in its mother's brain 18 years after she has given birth? You keep running, but I still have you in my bloodstream. And when I die, the fabric of you will be imprinted on my bones as you live in a future I won't get to see. Scrive quando arrivi. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Anna. That was awesome. Yeah. You say that you admire Carrie's delivery, but I think you got stronger as you went along there. I think you should be proud of yourself. Yeah. So our penultimate reader tonight is Beth Spencer. In 5th grade, Beth Spencer won first place in a contest with a poem called Why I Like to Read Good Books. Her prize was an atlas showing a world much changed since then. She has allowed that early success to persuade her to keep at it, writing, that is. She has been published in Wisconsin Review, Rag Mag, Wisconsin Poets Calendar, Carve Magazine, among others. Her essay on teaching appeared in a Geraldine R. Dodge project, A Passion for Teaching. She won first prize in the Dorothy Dalton Poetry Contest and a recent honorable mention in a contest at the Mill in Appleton, Wisconsin. Recently, her poetry has also appeared in Oasis, Solamente, Martin Lake Poetry Journal, and in several online journals. An essay was also published online in the Sunlight Press. She lives a few months each year in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, where she enjoys the contrast between the Minnesota winters and those of central Mexico. Her first book, C- in Conduct, is available on Amazon. In Beth Spencer's book, The Weight of Water, we encounter a woman who has not only come of age, but who has stepped firmly into her own power. Spencer writes of a difficult childhood that was not without its gifts, a painful first marriage that nevertheless brought the speaker her beloved sons, and of her life as it is now, a private world that has provided her enduring love and the chance to explore with her inquisitive mind. At no point does the poet stop interrogating the world, mining it for symbols, images, and synchronicities that might provide clues about questions we all ask. Why do we suffer? Is death the end? What does it mean to be loyal? What is love and can it last forever? Spencer is a poet that seems to believe that there are mysteries in life that we can't possibly untangle, but that should not stop us from trying. Please welcome Beth Spencer.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I want to thank the Loft and Gretchen for this wonderful year and my cohort. It was just a marvel. I also want to thank my husband who really supported me in doing this. So tonight I'm going to be reading 6 poems, and that's going to be kind of a brief summary of my life. So we're going to begin in junior high because, well, a lot of things began in junior high. This poem is called I Can Still Taste It, the Shame, sour in my mouth, embarrassed by the boys at a 7th grade party, taunting me, accusing me of wearing falsies when all it was 2 recent Christmas gifts, a properly fitting bra, and my new red sweater. Next, we're going to move to a place that many of us have shared, a broken heart. When the love affair is over, there is only the heavy shoes of rain beneath my collar, wasps set upon me when you stirred the nest. Your honey gone now, just the empty comb. A last sunset, the final act of our cruel play. A last sunset, the final act of our cruel play. You have drawn a line through my name, gone to flame as coal, as summer to September, canceled like a match in water, one small hiss, not even smoke for memory. And next we're going to move to arrive at the high plateau of a solid second marriage. This prompt for this poem was a poem by A. Lamone called The Four, and my poem is called After. After. The kids and I always lived on the edge, returned pop bottles for more cigarettes. But after I met you, after we were married, after we had 2 paychecks, after we bought the cottage and the dog went through the ice, after the fire in the kitchen, after the neighbors planted all those tulips and she had an affair with the guy who died then in an accident. After that, we had the Amish come re-roof the house with cedar shakes, and we drilled 3 holes between each set of studs on every outside wall to blow in insulation to wrap our new old house with warmth. Afterward, we painted every room and we learned carpentry and plumbing. We learned to tile floors. We have always worked so hard. And when we married, we read this to each other, Ecclesiastes 4. 2 are better than 1, for if either of them falls, the other one can help him up. And afterward, we made it true. Now we're going to go to a short excursion to the heart of Mexico, San Miguel de Allende, where I happen to be today. And it's the winter home of my heart. It's also the heart of Mexico, both geographically and historically. This poem is called Boarding the Wrong Bus in San Miguel. I am lucky then for Lydia. She offers me the sun of her attention. I learn that every evening after 5, she rides the autobus on Ruta 4 from her job in Central home to Santa Julia, a bumpy 40-minute trip. Today, perhaps she doubts her fortune sitting captured next to me, taking in the broken cookies of my words, the puzzle that I shake onto her lap, assembling the pieces of my questions into things that she and I can understand. Lydia speaks to me in simple Spanish. She advises me how long I will be riding and how far into the campo I will go before I can return to Centro to undo my error. She gestures when I need to press the buzzer to stop the bus, descend to street. She stays, she waits for me to board another bus parked off the pavement. Its hood is raised, the driver pouring a bottle empty of Coca-Cola into the motor, while 2 boys clean the seats and wash the narrow windows on the bus's farthest door. The driver bangs the hood down and the bus's giant maw shuts tight. The boys collect from me another 7 peso fare, and then I wait the only customer, snug against the window, wrapped in the warm surprise of kindness. And in my penultimate poem, we visit the joys of aging. This is called Epiphany After Menopause. We were taught to fear the witches, shadows at the curtains of a house dark as a howl. We ran past quickly, our knees of paper shaking. Can the wraths of reaching trees still catch us in our dreams? In the gloom between the streetlights, still as a stone of graveyards long into our age. We were taught to fear the witches, the bent back stoop and stiff pipe legs, the knuckle knotted ginger roots of fingers. The eyes shrunk and dimmed to a slitted sight, and scattered everywhere the fleshy warts and the erupting wires of winter hairs. Oh, crone with twisted yellow teeth, I am still afraid. When in a bitter moment, I realized that the witch we're taught to fear is any older woman, when I realized that the witch is me. And my last poem, we will consider some of life's many questions. This poem is titled Survey. 1, how do you feel about what happened to your mother? 2, do you believe? 3, are you famous enough yet? 4, when did you stop bleeding? 5, how likely are you to call that man who used to love you? 6, are you still lost? 7, about how near to dying do you think you are? 8, is that sugar I smell on your breath? 9, what would you really like to bury your face in? 10, have you ever been opened? Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. That was amazing. Yeah, such a powerful voice. I think that's something that I didn't say when I was talking about Beth is I think she has such a powerful and commanding and unique sort of voice. I would be able to pick her poem out of a pile, I'm sure. So thank you, Beth. That was beautiful. Our last reader tonight is Kayla Knoll. Kayla is a Northeast Minneapolis-based poet pursuing her MFA in creative writing at Hamlin. She has recently attended residency for writers at Good Contrivance Farm in Maryland. Kayla has been an intensive care nurse at the front line of the pandemic and also volunteers at Pet Haven, Minnesota as a dog and cat intake coordinator in partnership with rural shelters. In this, her first collection, Kayla Knoll demonstrates what a mistake we make when we reduce a person to one facet of their identity. Here we have a speaker that talks to us as a girl who has navigated a difficult childhood and who has sat with the dead as an abider. We hear from a nurse working in a neurological intensive care unit, a daughter who worries for and deeply loves her parents, and a woman with a deep home and language working through the anxieties of living through the Anthropocene through lyric poems that live deeply in imagination. Kayla has written a long poem called Abider, which is also the title of her book. She's broken that poem up and spread it out throughout her collection, but tonight she's going to read the poem straight through for you all, so it has 6 parts, but I will let her introduce the content. Please welcome Kayla Knoll.
Hi. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Gretchen. The good thing about going last is that I can hear everyone's beautiful work beforehand. Marika, Rachel, Kathy, Carrie, Anna, Beth, and of course our fearless leader, Gretchen. I consider you all my friends at this point and an ongoing inspiration. So like Gretchen said, my collection is called Abider. So Abider. Noun, one who bears patiently, one who sits with the dying. Verb, to endure without yielding, to await. So a little preface. So my mom was a single mother of 3, did an amazing job. Her mom was our second mother, my grandma Agnes. This is to start off, it's more of a child's view on seeing someone starting to forget people with Alzheimer's, starting to get into Alzheimer's. Abider 1. To get to Valley Nature, go down Desert Star Lane and to the left. Across the street where the neighbor kid, Mitchell, kissed me for a golf tee. Take a right at the water tower and go straight down to the fork. This is the closest my grandma has ever lived to us, other than that brief time recently that didn't work out. She had left in the middle of the night. Snuck out is not the word. She had no plan. She eventually knocked on my brother's basement window at 2 a.m. No memory of why she'd put on her baby blue rain jacket. That blackened sky was cloudless, and lifted her empty purse off the table. Because of that and the oven incident, she was placed in Valley Nature homes behind the secure doors of the unit for the demented, the lost, the confused. A code was written on a slip by the door for the clear of mind, instructions to type the code backwards on the keypad. Simple instructions could keep them trapped like that. Like rabbits who might disturb a garden of ordered lilies if the hutch was unlatched. That's where I could find my grandma Agnes. A short bike ride away, as I walked cream-colored halls, there was a poster just above my eye level. On tiptoes, I slowly read aloud, volunteers needed, abiders. Abider Part 2. Visits have proven hard for my mother, and for everyone really. My mom asks, why is your pillow lying on the ground? I don't deserve it, I say, to fall asleep. I am 9 years old. I've been punishing myself because grandma has been waiting for visitors and nobody has checked in. We weren't there to watch her roll the halls, searching for wind, for anything that she could no longer name. We'd avoid how she'd stare at her dinner, the mush so unlike her shortbread cookies, her homemade cherry nut ice cream. I go back to the abider's poster to write down the details, and a nurse offers me a Post-it note. I find my grandma in the living area placed in front of the women waltzing with Lawrence Welk, him spinning his champagne lady, back right, side, left, slide right to left. Grandma stares at the pixelated movements as though she knows them, as if her body can waltz too. She shifts in her wheelchair when I say, little grandma, it's Kayla. Her head does not turn, but she lets me plant a kiss on her cheek, doesn't pull my ponytail like she's been known to do to unexpected nursing assistants. This is her. Tell that you aren't a stranger. I confess to her about fractions, my frustration with how parts get broken off from the whole, how I can't always piece them back together. I am a good student, but I can't solve this yet. I tell her how I took a test on the borrowers, how the tiny family that lived unnoticed under the floors. She doesn't say a word, but I tell myself that she hears me. I will it in order to survive, like the clock family, how Pod and Arietti steal matchboxes and thimbles. I take her silence and create answers in my head. You took my hand and stroked my finger. You held onto my pointer, said, this is 1/5. I watched her almond eyes for a while, blue-gray in the center, but when I don't see a response, I bike back home. So going into the third, growing up, I was always a pretty independent kid. Like, for example, like my mom wouldn't know that I joined a theater group until I told her the day of the performance for the final show. In some ways, when I told her I was volunteering at the nursing home, I don't think I ever told her I'd signed up to sit with the dying. I don't think she learned that until I was older. So that's a preface to Abider 3. I tell my mom I'm going to volunteer orientation at grandma's nursing home. She turns her head away briefly from the piled dishes splashed with soap. Okay, honey, take care. I really didn't need to ask. The answer was yes, if I was willing to do it on my own. I lock my bike in its usual spot, twirling the chain around the spoke, but not clasping it. My mind considers maybe someone who lives here could use it for their grand escape. My inside joke gives me hope. Do they still know how to ride a bike? I walk past the cafe on the right, down the hall with the volunteers poster. Signs guide me into a conference-style room with 8 staring ladies. I enter with my notebook hugged to my chest and my bedazzled leather backpack that fits nicely on my shoulders. The woman running the orientation asks guardedly, "Do you know where you're supposed to be?" I catch her eye for long enough. I am here for orientation, to be an abider. I read the sign. She glances at the other women like a silent poll was being taken through her stares. She decides to continue. Orientation has officially started, and I'm happy that you've all donated your time to sit with the dying. No one should be alone, and you will prevent that. She looks at me. I do not flinch. So, yeah, this next one is more of an overview of what it looked like to abide for a nursing home resident. Abider 4. The phone rings. I yell to my sister and mom, "I got it," and pick it up. This is the first time since orientation that a resident has entered hospice. We are called only when the elderly have no one, family too far away, or they have no children. Their spouses are sometimes long past, and friends too. I pack up a book and a few CDs. Jackie Evancho, opera prodigy, and Celine Dion guides us. Once more, you open the door. I read passages of poetry and psalms if the abided are marked as being religious. Mostly, I'm there to bear witness that this person has lived until their last breath. I touch their hands so that they sense if they can still feel someone came. So the first 4 poems are more childhood perspective of the experience. And these last 2 will be more a retrospective on what it was like to sit with my grandma at her passing as my final abiding. Abider 5, or I Will Stay With You. I received the call between classes during finals week of my freshman year of college. I was thinking of going for English, maybe law. Little grandma is in the hospital, uncontrollable nosebleed. I doubt now that that was actually the diagnosis, but at the time, all I had to understand was she wouldn't get better. My family chose hospice and readied her transfer back to the nursing home for final days. Families always ask, how long will it take? I bet we did too. A blanket fell over my heart. I felt myself prepare the cushion for the blow. I don't remember making the decision, but I knew I'd be at her deathbed every day, every minute, other than final exams at the campus down the road. I wouldn't leave her this time. No more excuses that I had labeled tomorrow. She was short on those. The nurses in the home provided me a chair during the day and a cot at night. I would sit there with the sun, garnered my first taste for Black coffee. Days blended together, those short days crowded in on my goodbyes. My grandma was no longer at the point of responses. I talked in desperate monologues. The yellow dress I was going to wear for prom arrived in her room to remind her of our Beauty and the Beast filled hours after Head Start. She spent so much time with that movie, with us. I never bought that yellow dress. I remained a beast in my heart for a long time. My sister couldn't see grandma, her body failing, but she bought a stuffed dog to rest in the nook of her curled up arm. I remember when Lisa had won a huge stuffed orangutan from the county carnival when grandma had been living on Cherry Street. Lisa made mom bring it to show what she'd won, proud of her monkey, and forgot him. At our next visit to grandma, we found it placed atop her couch behind the veil of her main window curtains. Grandma placed him there to fend off intruders. Harbinger acts of paranoia commonly follows dementia. Did Lisa name that stuffed dog? I do know that my grandma never let go of Fido or Skippy or whatever his name. Whether rigid reflex or comfort embraced, his new home was near my grandma's heart. Toward evening time, I would play soothing music. It would usually make me cry, inspire me to start apologizing. I didn't visit enough. My age was not an excuse. I could have done better. I stopped talking every so often. The sound of my voice unanswered deafening. After a few days, I felt low on sobs, out of words, empty coffee cups. I'd exhausted my pleas, read all the books, depleted the caffeine. By the end of her second night in hospice, I heard the start of her rattle. I asked for more. The lungs leaky, filling with fluid where air should be. I asked for more morphine. No one should drown in their own body. I hope they gave her enough. The nurses warned me when they thought she was close. They always stopped short, never pinpointing a destination. Close to where? To paradise, the reaper, rebirth, depending on your ever after. I called my mom to come. She called her sister. My dad hadn't been to Christmas for 6 years, but he flew up from Colorado to be at our sides, the bedside of his ex-mother-in-law. People don't warn you that the last breath is tricky. A stalling engine, the pauses between sputters, in time, 10 seconds, 15, later, a minute. Is that even possible? Her breathing looked as exhausting as a marathon. We wanted it to be easy for her. Our mantra became, "It's okay, Grandma, you can go. We're here, you can go." We didn't count the times we said it. It was hummed like a static hymn, a song of passage, passage of song. Her inhale was never released. She took in her last bit of life and refused to give it back. A person cannot see death, only life stopped. The chaplain arrived. My dad kept telling him she never let go of that dog. Kayla gave it to her and she never let go. He looked at me with urgency. They all did, eyes a pinkish red and watery. I looked between them and the chaplain, let them all know at peace. She never did. And my final poem is a dedication to how abiding and eventually a career in nursing has impacted my view on life and on the sacredness of death. And so pretty light reading for Tuesday, but it doesn't end on a lighter note, I'll say that. Abider 6. My grandma's death was the last I experienced as an abider, my final living grandparent. As my second mother, she was my first true loss. After her death, I would change my major to nursing. It was the first time that I looked closely enough to see each mole on her face, to notice where the whiskers poked through her hands, as long and fragile as a note held by the champagne lady, held by Lawrence Welk. Someone had coiffed her hair in the stiff curls I recognized. Her frame in her royal purple nightie was even slighter in contrast to the bed. Years later, I would realize after all the patients under my care, she was always them and they her. Somewhere, my final bed waits for me with someone kind standing next to it. Maybe they'll brush back my hair too and put on Leon Bridges with the volume on low. Again, thanks for listening. And it was the 10th anniversary last month of my grandma's passing. So this reading was dedicated to her and my mother and my family watching. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kayla. That was very powerful. I hope you'll all, the people who read tonight, I hope you'll all go back now that the reading is through and look at some of the comments and see some of the feedback that you got while you were reading. I always kind of joke that there's like the Minnesota sigh that happens at poetry readings where people will really like a line and they just kind of like, And we can't hear that because of Zoom, but you can go back and read the comments and maybe there's some version of that there waiting for you. Thank you so much for everyone who read tonight, for sharing your work. It was inspiring and wonderful. Thank you for everyone who came to listen and be supportive. These folks have really put in a lot of hard work and effort, and so we greatly appreciate all of your support. And thanks just for spending a Wednesday night with us. It's just amazing to see so many people here. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Congratulations to all the poets. So I'm not sure if Jenny, did you say that folks should stick around, or what was your message to us in the beginning?
So yeah, we have the Zoom meeting here for quite a while longer. So if people have questions of our poets, or if you just want to make a comment, you're welcome to do that. There's quite a few people in the virtual room here, so it might be hard, to call on people. There is a raise your hand function. So if anyone has a comment or just wants to share, thank yous to our poets, or like I said, has question about anyone's creative process, you're welcome to unmute yourself and just speak up. You could try raising your hand. It takes me some time to scroll through everybody. I don't see everyone in my screen, so I won't necessarily catch hand raises quickly. But please feel free if anyone wants to unmute and just start talking. If you have comments, questions. Otherwise, we're also certainly able to end the night as well after beautiful, beautiful readings.
I did want to mention too, Jenny, there's still one more cohort that still has to read this week, correct? The nonfiction writers?
That is correct. So, well, tomorrow is the intended in-person novel writing project final reading. They ended up being online all year, like all of us, but they will be reading tomorrow night at 7. And again, you can sign up on the Loft website just as you did for tonight's reading. It's free. And then next week we'll have 2 creative nonfiction and memoir writing project readings. The first one is Tuesday evening, the 18th. Second one is Thursday evening, the 20th, both at 7 o'clock. And if you want to hear more really amazing work by really talented Loft students, please sign up on the website and you'll get the Zoom info in the confirmation email and join us.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming. It was a magical night. And I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of my cohort for our final kind of wrap up later on in the month. So thank you guys again.
Thank you everyone for being with us, and thank you poets for being brave enough to share your work. I know it's a vulnerable place to share work. I find poetry especially vulnerable. So thank you so much. Beautiful work, each and every one of you.
It's been an amazing experience. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you. Have a good night. Thanks again for everything, Gretchen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks to everybody.
And
Good
here, I'm
seeing.
sorry, I didn't give proper thanks to Gretchen at the beginning.
Oh, that's fine.
What a wonderful night.
Good year.
Well, thanks everyone.